So, what do we mean when we use the phrase hybrid genre anyway? What is a hybrid genre? Well, the word genre comes from a French word, the root of which we also get the word gender. So, think about that word. Uh, Historically or traditionally, biologically, we recognize two genders. That is to say, you're either one or you're the other. Now, of late, our understanding of how gender works has become a little more nuanced, and we understand that gender is maybe not as clearly delineated as folks used to think. Nevertheless, that gives you a sense of understanding what we mean when we talk about genre. So, there have historically been four literary genres that we recognize, at least here in the West, and that is poetry, fiction, nonfiction, and drama. So, but just as gender can become a fluid idea, so can genre. So when we think about genre, when we say, well, this particular work is this genre, it's the genre of a drama, let's say, or a play. That means that the literary work is characterized by certain features that are repeated in works of that kind. So, for example, if we're talking about poetry, we might say that genre is characterized by varying line lengths. Typically, line lengths don't go all the way to the right margin, right? Use of language and imagery to convey particular effects that tend to take precedence over a more structured or sustained plot line. Doesn't mean that some poems don't have stories within them, but generally a feature of poetry is that imagery and language tend to be privileged over a formal storyline. Poetry often does not have dialogue. Some poems do. Poems tend to be shorter than, for example, prose works. Similarly, if we talk about fiction, let's say the short story is a genre. Well, genre features for the short story tend to be that on the page, the line goes all the way over to the right margin. Punctuation is used in a certain conventional, fairly predictable way. Dialogue is part of it. You'll have a title at the top. You may have one or more characters. You're going to have some type of plot. There may be a climax or turning point. Within that story structure, you're going to have a setting. There'll be language use tends to privilege or support that storyline and all the elements that make up the storyline, such as setting, theme, and so on. And of course, a play, you could probably explain what the genre characteristics of a play are, right? So these are the features that we typically associate with a work of that particular category. When we talk about hybrid genres, now we're talking about genres that don't fit neatly into any one particular, poetry, fiction, nonfiction, or drama. Instead, hybrid genres often take elements from more than one genre and put them together to create something that is neither one nor the other, but maybe both. So, for example, we have prose poetry. A prose poem will look on the page very similar to a paragraph of prose. The line lengths, I should say, go all the way to the right margin. Line lengths wrap around. And yet, a prose poem will may still use the poetic elements of sound, meter, imagery, the privileging of effect or emotional emotional effect or word pictures over a particular defined plot. So a prose poem is going to take these elements, right? These two elements and merge them. Similarly, a lyric essay will take features of nonfiction and combine them with other elements. A hybrid genre, and let me just add here, a hybrid genre may also make use of non-literary genres in order to accomplish a literary purpose. So, for example, we have the epistolary form, which is where a letter is used to accomplish a literary purpose. And you've probably read stories that are epistolary. Frankenstein, for example, is a novel that is primarily in an epistolary form. There are lots of short stories that are epistolary. Getting back to a lyric essay may have sections of nonfiction that we would typically expect in an essay, but then it may be interspersed with a short poem or a quotation from another source or even an image. And all these elements come together. The key to a really good work of hybridity is that there will still be strong cohesion. That is to say, it's not just a jumble of a lot of different disparate elements, but rather the elements are chosen very carefully in order to create a particular unified effect or in order to have a point. So if you are writing a lyric essay, or if you look at a good, well-written lyric essay, there's going to be a point to it. There will still be a main claim that the writer's trying to make. But the way the writer goes about making that claim and supporting that claim is going to be through a much wider range of strategies than you might find in a classic work of nonfiction. I hope this makes sense. Okay, let me see. I've got a few notes here that I want to make sure. Okay, so this semester we're going to experiment with at least 5 different hybrid forms. That is to say, we're going to use the epistolary, so you're going to write a letter. We're going to do a lyric essay, a poetic memoir, prose poetry, and short form nonfiction, and flash fiction. I guess that's 6. We'll see how it goes. That's what I'm aiming for. However, let me say that the purpose of this course is not to turn you into this, professional lyrical essayist or anything. We're just we're using these hybrid genres as a means to an end. If one or more of them ends up being an end in and of itself for you, awesome. But we're not really spending a tremendous amount of time with any one of them. Instead, what I'm hoping for you to do is to draw on the work that you've done over the past couple of years, right, of creative writing work here at IU East, and use that as the raw material, drawing from that raw material to create, let's say, to write a letter from a character. So one of your first assignments is going to be having a character from one of the works you've done write a letter to someone. That letter in and of itself might not be useful, might not be, anything you're going to want to get published, may or may not be. But in writing that letter, you may discover something new about that character that will then allow you to go back to that short story and make some interesting revisions. That's kind of the goal of what we're after this semester. So, that's hybrid genres. The book we're reading, your first reading is Suzanne Paola's, I haven't got the book right here, Suzanne Paola's essay with the Sphinx in the title. I'm blanking on the title of the chapter. Actually, Suzanne Paola was one of my professors when I was working on my master's. She's at Western Washington University. So read that chapter. That's going to give you a little more insight into the nature of hybridity. It's very exciting. I mean, it offers you the chance to create something new, even though you're not actually creating new work the way you've created new work in past writing courses. I want you to use your existing work and as the raw material for the hybrid experiments that we do. Okay, I look forward to seeing what you come up with.